I'm not concerned about anything. The testimony has all been fine. I mean, for the most part, I never even heard of these people. I have no idea who they are. They're some very fine people. You have some never-Trumpers. It seems that nobody has any first-hand knowledge. There is no first-hand knowledge. And all that matters is one thing, the transcript. And the transcript is perfect. Mark Levin last night on television, who's a great constitutional lawyer, he broke it down. He said, what Trump said, and he was respectful, he said, President Trump. What President Trump said was perfect on the transcript. What he said on that telephone call with the president of Ukraine was perfect. He said nothing else matters. And what he said was perfect. And he analyzed it, every line, every paragraph. It was not complex, it was perfect. Nothing else matters. With that being said, every one of those people cancel themselves out. So what they do is they go all over Washington. Let's find the 10 people that hate President Trump the most, and let's put them up there. Now, in some cases, they really turned out to be very much honest and fair, but in no cases have I been hurt. In no cases that I see have I been hurt.
The president is clearly trying to say that he is not concerned about the investigation, undermining the investigation, and labeling anyone who's speaking out that has gone in to testify in this investigation a never-Trumper.
Right, and I think one of the things that's most interesting about that is the president did say, Kate, that in his view there should not be public impeachment hearings. That's interesting because when you look at what the president and some of his allies have been saying about the closed door depositions, they've said those shouldn't be going on either. Suffice it to say the president and his allies don't think there should be any impeachment inquiry at all. Now, that's pretty much on the record. One of the most interesting things I think we got out of that is the president referred 3 different times to releasing a second rough transcript, if you will, of a conversation with the Ukrainian president. That, of course, has never been released. The president started out saying that if they want it, I'll give it to them, apparently referring to the impeachment inquiry. But then he changed his story a little bit. He said, I'll probably give it to them the second time he talked about it. And by the time he got to his last reference to that second call and releasing it, the president said, we're considering giving it to them. So clearly there's been a lot of controversy here at the White House about the release of the rough transcript of the first call and all that ensued, because when you put that together with the whistleblower's complaint, it really provided the impetus for this impeachment inquiry. And about the whistleblower, also important to say, the president continued his attacks on the intelligence community whistleblower, calling him or her a disgrace, saying that person ought to be revealed, and says his lawyer ought to be sued. Interesting, his lawyer, Andrew Bakaj, did put out a letter just yesterday indicating that the president ought to cease and desist in his attacks on the whistleblower because he was creating an atmosphere of intimidation.
Yeah,
Kate,
Joe, thank you so much. I will say, while there is talk about this another call with Ukraine, I think there's a strong argument to be made that where things are at this point is beyond one phone call and really not even at a place of talking about another call. I think this kind of always gets into a dangerous place of kind of losing the forest for the trees, which I always screw up that metaphor in terms of everything that has come out since the transcript of that call on the 25th has come out.
It doesn't feel real. It just doesn't. Nothing. No, it feels like a bad movie right now.
Jay Chattel and his family are devastated. They're mourning the loss of Troy Pine, Chattel's uncle, who was stabbed to death the night of October 2nd. It happened at this popular hookah lounge in Providence, Rhode Island. The motive is still unclear. The suspect, 41-year-old Joel Francisco, now behind bars.
My family wants answers. My brothers want answers.
This past February, Francisco was released from federal prison. He had served 14 years of a life sentence for selling drugs like crack cocaine. But his sentence was reduced to time served, and he was let out. Why? Francisco was released under the First Step Act, a bipartisan criminal justice reform bill signed into law by President Trump last December. Many lawmakers on both sides of the aisle calling the act a way to address those nonviolent offenders serving unduly harsh penalties. According to the Department of Justice, more than 4,700 federal inmates have been released early since the First Step Act was ushered in late last year. Federal officials say it appears Francisco's case is the first example of someone released under the act going on to be accused of murder.
It's a flawed system. It's a beautiful program to get people to come home that don't need to be dying in jail. There's got to be more steps. Some people have to be held accountable.
Nearly 3 months before Pine's murder, police in Providence had a run-in with Francisco. This police report shows he was arrested and charged with domestic violence and attempted breaking and entering. This after police say Francisco, armed with a knife, attempted to break into his ex-girlfriend's home. An attorney representing Francisco in that case has not responded to multiple requests for comment.
Francisco's ex-girlfriend says she has concerns about her safety and did not want to speak on camera. She went on to say that Francisco should not have been released, and she says that anyone who has been incarcerated and then released should then have to check in with mental health experts.
Francisco was scheduled for a court appearance on October 15th regarding that incident involving his ex-girlfriend. Nearly 2 weeks before that date, Pine was killed. Republican Senator Tom Cotton, an outspoken critic of the First Step Act, said this case is upsetting, but it's not a surprise. Letting violent felons out of prison early, as the First Step Act did, leads to more crime and more victims. But other lawmakers who helped pass the law stood by it in the wake of Pine's death.
The bill doesn't attempt to address all the ills within our current system.
Congresswoman Karen Bass cited the Pine case during an oversight hearing on the new law.
I hope that this does not detract from the need in our country to really examine our criminal justice system.
Rhode Island State Senator Sam Bell, who represents the district where Pine was killed, says the problem is not with the new law, but a failure to reintegrate Francisco.
Was it a failure to reintegrate him into society, or was it a failure in terms of he never should have been out in society?
Look, I mean, once you've served your time and served for a fair period of time, we should give people second chances.
Look at that smile, man. That's him.
Jay Chattel says despite all that has happened, he still supports the idea behind the First Step Act, but he also says more steps should have been taken to stop the man who was charged with the murder of his uncle. Jason Carroll, CNN, Providence, Rhode Island.
This is a close race. We are not conceding this race by any stretch. Not a chance. And here's the thing. Understand this, though. Understand this. We want the process to be followed, and there is a process. We know for a fact that there have been more than a few irregularities. They are very well corroborated, and that's all right. What they are exactly, how many, which ones, and what effect, if any, they have will be determined according to law that's well established. And just for the record, and some of you are well aware of this, 4 years ago I found myself in a very similar situation. Again, the law was followed in that instance. Turns out that it ended up being 4/10 thousandths of a percent, or whatever it was, 83 votes. My point is this: we want the process to be followed. The process will be followed. And in the end, we will have the governor that was chosen by the people of Kentucky. And that's the way the process should work.